Okay, now I go back into share. So again, so share that screen. Okay, so now you can see my window there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so the basic things students need to start doing. Oh, and the bug, I've just instantly triggered a bug. Okay. And the bug is because we're going from single to multi-threading right now. Notice that I'm trying to move it and I can't, nothing happens. Now, what actually is happening, it is moving, but Windows is not updating the screen buffer. So what I've do is force it to do that, and I can do that by going to the Equations tab and going back again, and now I've got access, okay? So that's, it's actually good in some ways that bug occurred straight away so students can see that.
So is this the version that the students will have access to, which you
Yeah,
forwarded
yeah,
me?
well, they just showed the latest version. I'll happy to send you the latest version. This is version 3.23. So I'll make sure they've got the latest version, and I can do that by just sending you an email link. Okay. So what you do is you get the main thing that students have to use to get a model built is this bank icon up here. So I'll quickly put together a quick model of standard banking. I'll do it very, very quickly and show what's involved. So again, that same bug has come back. So I've got to go back over to equations once more. Yeah, that's just, it's a Windows bug. And it's actually the sequencing of different events. And sometimes the multi-threading gets in the way of itself and we don't actually manage to do anything. Anyway, this is the icon that gives you access to the double entry bookkeeping side of the program. And we make extensive use of the right click menu. So if you right click on it, you see a drop down menu and there's title there. So I'm going to call this banks. So you've got the banking sector that way. Okay. Now then another option is editor mode. And now notice that there's like, I'm going to zoom in using the scroll bar on the mouse. So that zooms in. I'm going to hold the shift key down. Same bug. Bloody hell. This is getting even worse than it was the last time I tried to use the program. You can zoom in and zoom out. You've also got these handles on the edge there. So if you click on one of the handles and drag, you change the size of something. This gives you the default size for the program. This gives you maximize the whole thing. This varies, increasing and out and reducing, and you can do the same thing using the scroll bar and the shift key to move stuff around on screen. So those sort of absolute basics for setting the program up. There is a little, there are two ways to edit one of these tables. One is if you right click one of the, I'll bring another table down, you can have as many as you like. If I right click on that, one of the options is editor mode. So I'll title this one poor, just means as in poor people. So that's
My marketing people will hate you, Steve. You're meant to call them low-income households.
I'll call them working class or whatever else. But that's actually, let's be serious, okay? So this is working class. And I'm going to create another one called capitalists. So same story, titled as capitalists. And each of these is sitting behind each of these is exactly the same thing I've got showing on the bank there. It's sometimes tricky to grab stuff. This again is the hassle of supporting multiple operating systems, makes things much more complicated. But I'll put these three in this sequence, and then if I right click and I choose open the Godly table, then I get the double entry bookkeeping view of that individual table, and I can zoom in. If I hold the, I can make that full screen. If I hold down the arrow, the control key, I can zoom in and zoom out. So I was going to get rid of this thing getting in the way here. Okay, so let's say I'm going to have WC, I'll call this deposits, DEP for deposits, WC working class, and let's just put this in and put a pound symbol. So you're showing you're talking about money in this particular case. So those are the deposits of the working class in money. Okay? Having done that, and now we're going to have over here working class equity. So I'm showing what the net worth of the working class is in terms of money, and I'm also going to have, let's say, deposits of the working class in universal carbon credits. So that's at a okay.
Okay,
That's yeah,
Steve, we just got to point out here that the universal carbon credits is the same thing as the carbon currency based on carbon allowances.
yeah, same sort of thing. Yeah. Okay. Now this um, I'll go back and I'll keep on building an overall system here just to show what's involved. So I've now working. If I now right click and I choose to put the working class thing in editor mode and make it a bit larger so you can see it. So you can see all those elements have turned up defined in this thing as well. And there is a way to do this at the level of the canvas here rather than having to bring up that menu. So if you right click, one of your options here says row column button. See that below editor there? If I click on that, that adds little buttons that let us add and change things on the canvas rather than needing to go to that particular window. This is just easier. It's a new feature only available in the latest version of the program. Um, but it makes things easier to do. I'll put the capitalist in editor mode as well. Notice again, this same bug has turned up. This is really quite bad. I just click on equations and come back again, and now you've got access to it. Now I'll put this in editor mode as well. Okay. Now, if I right click, notice that's a different right click menu. Again, these are all the hassles when you're developing software. We've just added this feature. It needed a couple of menus, and there are two menus that get in the way of each other. So I don't want that menu. If I click slightly further over, I get the other one. And I want row column buttons. You've got to fuck around basically to get that done. So I try up here, I get the menu where I can't add that row column buttons. If I move over to the side here, still the same thing. Move here, buggerize around. Um, Finally, I've got the one I want. So there's a bit of stuffing around involved. And my apologies for that. It's just that when you're developing software and you've only got one programmer, these things can occur. So notice I've got deposits of the working class in pounds shown as an asset of the working class. The thing about double entry bookkeeping is something is an asset for one entity and a liability for others. So if I come up to the banks, those deposits are liabilities of the banks. So if I click on this little wedge here, under liability, it goes looking for any assets that haven't yet been shown as a liability for somebody else in the system. So if I click there, I'm going to get, oh, great. Same bloody bug. This is even worse than I've ever seen it before. Okay, there are the two. So I've got working class universal carbon credits and working class pounds. So I want the pounds one because that's what the banks themselves control. So you do this all the way through. Let's say we have another asset. I'm going to call this the deposits of K for capitalists. And I'll make this, again, superscript in pound. That indicates you're talking about. Now, what happened there? Oh my God. Okay. K, and I wanted the pound symbol inside there. Why is it not letting me type the pound there? I might put that in curly brackets because curly brackets tells the program to. Okay, I have no idea why it's not letting me type a pound symbol. Maybe it's something in my keyboard. I really don't know. I'll type a dollar symbol there instead. So that is now the deposits of capitalists, which are a liability of the bank. They're an asset of the capitalist. So I come down here. I'm now showing that as an asset of the capitalist class. But before I try to show the carbon credit, I'll just show how to put up a basic model of monetary transfers here. So I need to have a couple of extra things added here. I've got no assets for the bank. One asset I need to have is reserves for the banks. And then create room for another asset and call this loans to subscript WC, working class people. And then say loans to capitalists. So loans subscript K for capitalists. Okay, and now they have been created as assets of the bank. They're going to be liabilities of the other group. So that's a liability for the working class. That's a liability for the capitalists. And I now, since I've got reserves there, so this is the liability for the workers, and I've shown that over here. That's a liability for the capitalist. I've shown that. Deposits for the workers, shown that. Deposits for capitalists, I've shown that. So that's all complete. Reserves aren't complete yet because I've got reserves there, but I haven't shown that's reserves as an asset of the bank, but it's a liability of the central bank. So I need another bank icon. I'll right click and title this one BOE for Bank of England. That's the Bank of England. Then put that into editor mode. Now these are all the menus turning up on the other side of my screen over here, so let's make it a bit larger. So now we have reserves for an asset of the bank. They're a liability of the central bank. That turns up there as well. And now they have, say, BOE equity, net worth of the Bank of England. And now let's just, I'll quickly build a basic model involving capitalists getting loans from the banks and workers earning wages, etc., etc. This is the stuff the students need to learn how to do themselves. So I've got reserves inside there, but I have no other flows. If I want to add transactions, you click on the plus key here, and that creates an additional row where you can show various transactions. Let's say I've got pay wages, because the workers are going to work for the capitalist, of course. Well, that's going to be a transfer of wages from the capitalist bank account to the workers' bank account. And once you've done that, you'll now see that they turn up in the other tables. So wages for the working class are turning up here. Wages increase the net worth of the workers. So you can actually just type the word wages here, and that balances the equation. Equally for capitalist, I'll have capitalist equity here. And then wages reduce the equity of the capitalists. And the program has an automatic way for filling in details like this. If you're below the equity column and you right click, one of the options is balance equity. So that brings it across. So I've got the basic story, workers earning a wage. Then let's now have consumption. And that's going to be money coming out of here. And I'll call this minus CONS for consumption and subscript W for workers. And then you can now say, well, that transfers money from the workers to the capitalists. So if I right click here, I can insert a flow that's consumption by workers, and that increases the amount of the deposit account. And now you've got that completed. It should have come down here. This is, again, another bug in the program. Well, let's say you've got consumption by workers. Consumption reduces the net worth of the workers. Yeah, that should have come back over here. I don't know why it didn't turn up. It's just one of these hassles that occurs occasionally. So I now type workers' consumption here. And that's going to be minus, exactly as I've typed above, minus consumption by workers. And then, oh, now what the fuck is going on there? Oh, I've got a minus. There's supposed to be plus coming in there. Delete that row. Okay. So workers' consumption should turn up as a positive for the capitalists. And I've typed, I'm sorry, I'm showing you all sorts of bugs in the program because I typed consumption in lowercase, and that's what's up here. So I need to have that as shown as consumption from workers turning up in the deposit accounts, which increases the net worth of the bankers. This one here is just an error that's turned up in the program. So you've got wages being paid, consumption coming back in, and I can now start relating this, putting some values on this. So I need to have some numbers inside here. you put the amount of numbers that recognise a particular point in time. So let's say reserves are 100 billion pounds at one point in time, and loans to workers are 200 billion, and say loans to capitalists are 300 billion, and then you're going to have an amount in deposit accounts. I've got to have the bank's equity here as well, so that might be why I didn't get that thing reproducing properly before. And that's the net worth the banks are in there as well. Let's say you've got deposits to the working class of 50 and deposits to the capitalists of 500, and therefore the banks have a net worth of 50. So I'll right click here and balance that. So that's now a balanced pattern there. And then you take a look at what's happened for the equity for the rest of the system. If I right click here, I can choose balance equity. So that number comes across. Right click here, balance equity, right click here, balance equity. So I've now got a beginning of a structure for the whole system. And what's actually happening in the background, the students might find this informative. These equations are being designed by you as you type them in. So you're getting the rates of change of the programs. The rate of change of deposits by capitalists is equal to consumption out by workers minus the wages they're paying to workers. And equally, the workers are in a different direction, and so on. So you're building a set of differential equations to simulate a dynamic system there. And if I now want to start defining what those flows are, then you need to transfer. And here we go. Same bug. It's amazing. I'm going to, if you can send a copy of this recording to me, I can pass it on to the programmer so you can see how frequently this is happening. I'll actually check and see what version of I'm running here. I'm pretty certain I'm running the latest version, 3.23. Yeah, so this is just a bug that Russell's aware of, he's working on, but it hasn't been fixed yet. But that's the solution. Go across to another tab and come back, and things will work. So I zoomed in there and it didn't show the zoom. Now it's showing the zoom there. So I want to transfer these elements from the tables onto the canvas where I can define them. And if you right click on the menu, you get a choice of copy flow variables and copy stock variables. So I've now got all those elements turning up there. Now, let's just say we want to define wages. Then wages are going to be based on either a defined GDP. So the simplest thing I can do to define GDP is to say that money is the sum of the amount of money of the funds in these accounts, and you add them together to get the money supply. You can also define the money supply by the transfers. You can have the expenditure approach to measuring GDP. All these things, the things I hope. Oh, the two students, you've got two students involved, haven't you?
Yeah, there are more who are going to be watching the recording.
Oh, okay, okay.
You and Luke are.
Okay, so I'll show the basics. I'm going to do a simple argument to say there's a stock of money which turns over so many times per year, and that gives you GDP. What they'd need to do to make it more sophisticated is have expenditure-based definition of GDP. I'll try that initially, even though a lot of consumption, I'm only going to have workers' consumption turning up in this model. Of course, capitalists consume, but they pay other capitalists to do it. Capitalists invest. All these things are necessary to generate a realistic, a more complicated, realistic model. And that's where Tyrone Keynes' work is so useful, because he's really built quite sophisticated models. But let's argue that, here we go again, same bug. Back to equations. Okay, now it'll work. So let's say I want to add consumption plus wages together and call the sum of the two GDP. So expenditure is the sum of the two. Add the two together and then call this, and again, the same fucking bug, pardon the French, but this has really got much worse than the latest version I've shown. So total, this is, I'll call this the expenditure method. So if I type a hash key, that tells the program I'm writing a comment. So I'm going to have GDP by expenditure method, which is quite simple. Press the enter key and you then get a text string so you can show what you're doing there. So now I'll call this GDP. And then you wire that up to there, and now you've got what total GDP is, but you now need to say what wages are equal to and what consumption by workers is equal to. And the easiest thing for consumption by workers is to say that workers consume based on the amount of money in their bank accounts. So I can bring this over here and find what's called the time constant by engineers. And I'm going to type backslash and the letter TA, the word TAU, and that's the Greek letter for T. So that's going to give me a Greek T formed there at the moment. And I type an underscore, which gives me a subscript, and then say W for workers to show this is the rate of consumption by workers. And now I'll get the form definition window pops up, and this is going to be a parameter. You can make it a variable in the model, but it's easiest to start by making it a parameter. And this tells you how long can workers spend without emptying their bank accounts. Now, workers are poor, okay? So workers have got a small amount of money in their account per person. So it might be that if they can last, say, let's say they can last a month before they empty their bank accounts of money. Well, that means the time constant is 1/12 of a month, which is about 0.08. But you might say, well, maybe they can last 3 months. Well, that's 1/4 of a year. That's the time constant of 0.25. And maybe they can only last a week, which is the time constant of 0.02, which is 1/50th of a year, and make the step size 1% of a year, 0.01. I've now got this thing, and again, the same bug. Back again, click on equations, back over here. Now I can grab things and move it around. That's the time constant for workers. So if I divide the bank deposits of workers by that amount, and I'm not sure why that's not showing me the numbers. I'll hit the recalculate key and see if the numbers, right now the numbers turn up. So if I now divide the amount of money in the workers' deposit accounts by the time constant, then I now can define consumption by workers, 625. And then you have wages. Let's say wages are some fraction of GDP. That's the easiest way to build a model. So I'm going to define another variable, a parameter called wage frac for fraction. And let's say workers get 60% of GDP. So I give that a value of 0.6, and I can give myself a bit of a range, say maximum 0.7, minimum 0.4, and a step size of 1%, 0.01. And now if I multiply GDP by the, right, no, okay, no, I don't want GDP coming out there. This is when you get a problem. So it's worth me showing the students get a problem out of this. If I should try to divide this, I'm going to generate an error here. And I know this because I want that to go back to wages. Now the program is going to tell me if I do that, that I have a, let's see, and run it, and it's going to give me an error. It better give me an error. Okay. Maximum error recursion reach. This is what happens when you try to define a, you've got wages depending upon wages, which is obviously false. So I want consumption by workers. I've defined that. If I hit the recalculate key, that'll give me a value for consumption. I now want wages to be determined independently in the model, not determined by GDP, but determined by some fraction of the amount of money, let's say, in the accounts of capitalists. So let's say there's a certain rate of flow of things out of deposit accounts that go to workers. So how long would it take? Now looking at how long would it take capitalists to reduce their accounts if they only paid wages and got nothing else coming in? Let's say they'd last a year. So I'm going to have the time constant for, let's see, K, put this in curly brackets, K2 wages, badly formatted, but this will give them an idea. Make that a parameter, and let's say that if capitalists were only paying wages, how long would it take them to empty their bank accounts? And it might be that might take them 2 years, let's say, to empty the bank accounts. Maximum 1, minimum, say, a maximum of, say, 5 years to do it, minimum of 1 year. So now if I divide the that amount, this is now saying the amount being paid in wages per year will be what I divide by here. So now I can define wages there. And now I've got GDP created. As you can see, the GDP is 875. That's come out of the model. Okay. So now you've got, if you now want to just simulate and see how the model behaves, then create a graph. Well, let's take a look at GDP here. I take a copy of GDP and plot it over here. And then let's take a copy of these two parameters and make them a little dashboard up the top here. And now hit run. And now GDP stabilizes, as you can see, it reduced there. What if this time constant increases? Then you get little falls in wages in the GDP because the workers consuming less. If this one goes, this falls, and you get changes in GDP that way, but there's no creation of money as yet. You can see the dynamics turning up, but no creation of money. So the simplest way to show that is that capitalists, I can delete this one now, capitalists borrow money from banks. So that is going to be an increase in the loans for capitalists. So this is, credit going to capitalists, and that increases the amount of money inside this account. So they both rise. And now I can define credit. Let's now get a copy of that variable. So I could right click and do the same thing here with the copy flow and stock variables, but you're better to use a little thing we call a browser. And you can get the browser through the, let's see, through the insert menu. So I now want to bring in credit, which is here. Click on credit and bring that into the program here. And let's say credit is a fraction of GDP. So I'll call credit underscore frac for fraction. And let's make the parameter with the value of, say, 0, but a maximum of, say, 20% of GDP and a minimum of minus 10% of GDP and a step size of 1%. So I now multiply the credit frac by GDP. Again, that same bloody bug. So now I've got credit. Let's make that a control parameter as well. And now run the model and nothing happening there. But what if credit frac goes positive? Then you're increasing GDP because more money is being borrowed into existence and causing more economic activity. You can see everything else is changing there as the model goes on. So that's the basic idea of designing a model in Ravel. It's much faster than doing anything with neoclassical ideas because you've got to learn a year of micro before you can do anything. But this is it basically makes it easier to build the dynamic side of a model. But it'll be probably unfamiliar to these students when they first try. What have they done? Have they done economics degrees?
You're on an economics degree, right? You're reading.
Yeah. Yes.
We have a couple of others who are doing economics. We also have, I'm not sure who it is. Luca, is it geography and economics or is it, um,
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Okay, so you
uh-huh.
guys are listening in there. Okay, yeah. So have you done differential equations at any of your training?
Yep.
Oh, good. Okay, who's that?
I think both of us have.
Okay, and which
Yeah.
degree? And which degree you're doing?
Undergraduate economics.
Okay, so you've done some differential equations. Okay, not as many as you should, but enough to at least. Do you follow what I've been doing here?
Somewhat.
Yeah, it's a bit strange when you first see it, but I'll give you an idea of the sort of models that can be created using Ravel. It's going to save this very rapidly as God knows. I'll put it in my policy subdirectory. I have so many bloody subdirectories. Do I have one here for us yet? Let's see. Okay. Universal carbon credits, and I put it inside there. Yeah, so I'll just show one of Ty's models now, and he's really this person who's working need to see to realize just how sophisticated these models can be. So I'm going to go and find one of his models here. Examples, Tyrone Keynes, and this is what he called dynamic disequilibrium, non-equilibrium, non-neoclassical models. So let's load it. Okay, and we put the whole thing in screen there. Let's just make it hit screen size. You can build quite sophisticated models, in other words. It'll take you a while to get your heads around doing it. So I recommend starting from the simplest models and building up before you try to tackle something like the universal carbon credit. To show the equations behind this, and let's just, if I can zoom out a bit. Those are all the parameters in the model. Differential equations are down here. It's something which you'd have a hell of a hard time trying to define all this stuff yourself dynamically, but the program is doing it for you. First of all, in the tables giving you all those different equations. So I'll just show this one here, for example, and open that godly table for the representative capitalist in this particular model. And those are the transactions that are being shown here: consumption, interest payments, bond purchases, net borrowing, share purchases, etc., etc. You can build a complete monetary model of capitalism using this approach, but it becomes quite challenging. So what I might do to give you a show is I'll build. You've all studied loanable funds at university, I presume? The students there? A bit of quiet there. Can somebody tell me if they've studied what's called loanable funds?
I can't say I've heard of that before.
Yeah, which year are you in?
Second year.
Okay, you would have done it in first year. You would have blinked and missed it because it's just the neoclassicals teach that model to explain why they don't include banks in their macro models. So they teach it and then they disappear. They would have done it using supply and demand curves as well. They wouldn't have been using double entry bookkeeping. So I'll quickly show you how I build that model and how I convert it across to Ravel, and that'll give you a bit of a clue of what to do to start building a model here. But you are going to be on a learning curve. There's no two ways about that. So I'll start now with a new file, not saving the change one. And so I'm going to create the model that the textbooks teach you is how banks operate. So call this is going to be banks. And then I'm going to have savers. And borrowers. And now I'll put these into editor mode and then resize them. So I can now start building a model here. Now I'll try the same thing of doing this on the menu. So this is tricky. This is not quite a bug, but it's an unfinished feature. So you know, I'm getting one menu here. I can change title and I can add a flow and delete a flow, but I can't bring up those buttons. Just keep on clicking until you get that particular menu coming up here, and there it is. Just row and column buttons. I don't believe that's again the same hassle. Click on equations, come back again. So those the row and column buttons there. Buggerizing around until I get it. There we go, row column buttons, and then the same thing over here. Row column buttons. So now I'm going to build the textbook version of loanable funds, and that's that the banks don't actually lend money. They enable one group of non-banks to lend to another group of non-banks. So here's reserves, and I'm going to have savers having a bank account at the bank, and then create one more and have borrowers having an account here. And then have the bank's equity. So banks, lowercase, subscript D for equity here. Let's put some numbers inside here. So say, oh, again, same bug. Bloody hell. I really need a copy of this video, Adam, to show Russell how often this bug is turning up. Let's say there's 60 in savers accounts and say 30 in borrowers accounts, and therefore the remainder's in the bank account. So I'm going to right click here, and now again, that same bug. Bloody hell. Okay, so right click here and choose balance the equity. And now let's have lend money. And that's going to be a flow of lend dollars per year coming out of savers accounts. So I type minus lend there. And that then means lend dollars per year flow into borrowers account. So each time you're writing something, you make sure that each line sums to 0. And now then so pay interest. Now again, that bug. Bloody hell. So now I've got an extra row there. So pay interest. And interest is a flow of funds out of borrowers accounts. Again, that damn bug. So I want minus interest here coming out of borrowers accounts, and it becomes plus interest over here when it goes into savers accounts. So that's the basic model of loanable funds. Now, that's only showing in the bank's account here, but I now need to show that that's affecting the net worth of each of these parties. So if I come over to asset here and click on this little wedge, that goes looking for any liabilities that haven't yet been allocated. I want savers accounts to be shown under savers, so I click there. That information comes across. Then I have, say, savers equity here. And let's go to borrowers, the same thing. So I click in the down arrow. Again, that same bug. Come back and reset it. There's borrowers. And then we finally have borrowers equity here. Okay. And interest, of course, there's a liability when you borrow money and go into debt. So I want debt to be entered here. Again, that same bug. So just click on the other tab to get rid of it. So I'll type debt here as a liability of the borrowers. And of course, lending increases that liability. So I want to type lend inside here. Again, that same bug is turning up. So I've got to go across here, boom, boom. Now type lend, because that will now balance that line. So lending increases the amount of money in the borrower's bank account, but also increases the debt the borrower's owed. And now over here, interest payments reduce the equity, the net worth of the borrowers. So I've now completed that table. Now I needed the same thing over here. And of course, debt is a liability of the borrowers, but it's an asset of the savers. Again, the same bloody bug. So come over here, click on the plus key and create an extra column, and then click on the down arrow, and that finds the unallocated liability at that stage as an asset of the banks. And now I want to balance the equity here. So that's a basic model of loanable funds. Now, let's see what happens with it. Again, same bloody bug. Got to get rid of it. So I now want to show the financial implications of this. And the simplest thing to argue is that work in terms of velocity of money here. So I've got savers and borrowers and banks together giving the amount of money in the economy. So if I right click here, again, I've got to get the right click menu, copy the flow variables, and then right click again, get the right menu that I want here. Still not getting it. Okay, copy the stock variables, and then I want to copy debt across as well. I can either go to the insert menu here and choose the variable browser, or I can do it from here. If I click on the VAR widget button there, that gives me 4 options, including the browser. And the browser comes up and I can say I want to look at debt as well. So I click on debt and place it on the canvas. Now, the easiest equation to find is that interest payments are equal to debt times the interest rate. So I can now just type the word interest rate. You can see it turning up in the top window up the top there, this one here. Click on OK. I'm now defining another parameter. Let's get the value of that of, say, 5%, maximum of 20, a minimum of 0, step size of 1%. And now I've got interest rate as a variable. If I multiply interest by the interest rate, And again, same bug. So I guess click on the tab to get rid of it. So interest times debt is the interest payment. At the moment, there's no debt there, so there's no interest payment. But let's now generate something that gives you a GDP out of it. And here I'm going to make a very simple argument that the sum of the money in these three accounts, or the sums in those three accounts are money. So I can add a plus key, connect the elements of the system here to each other. So I'm adding the three together and call this money. And then money by velocity of money. Make that a parameter, give it a value of 2, maximum of, say, 3, minimum of 1, and a step size of 1. And again, it looks like I created if everything doesn't head up on screen, just go across and click to another window there. So I now have money by velocity. I hit recalc, it'll calculate what money is equal to. I know that inconsistent, another bug. I'm sorry to be showing so many bugs here. There's somehow a unit turned up on the system when I didn't define one. But I think that shouldn't cause a problem. We'll soon see. So I multiply money by money velocity. I get GDP. And now makes lending some fraction of GDP. Now again, that same bug has turned up again. Okay. So I want to multiply GDP by a lend frac. Let's call it lend subscript frac. And give it a value initially of 0, but a maximum of, say, 20% of GDP and a minimum of minus 10%, because when you repay debt, lending is actually negative. Step size of 1. If I now multiply lend frac by GDP, I then get lending. Notice at the moment there's no lending there, but if I put the arrow key over lend frac and press the up arrow key, you increase it, and press the down arrow key, you reduce it, and you changing it all by the step size I've defined earlier. Let's start off with 0 there anyway. And now let's just graph this, because this is going to show you why the loanable funds model, which textbooks teach, argues that you can ignore the banking sector when you do macro models, because I'll change the amount of lending and nothing will happen to GDP. So let's now take a copy of lend frac and a copy of velocity and a copy of the interest rate and place them here. And now I can do a bit of use like a control panel, hit the run key up here. Now the inconsistent years message, I can get rid of that, but I'll show you how to do that in a moment. So I've increased the lend frac. Nothing happens to GDP. No change, okay? And let's just actually take a look at the amounts of money in the account as well. To get rid of that error message, under Edit, you have Remove Units, okay? Because we find this is a regular bug that turns up, so I've got a way to get rid of it. So I click on Remove Units, that'll get rid of that particular hassle. So I've got lending there. Let's take a look at the amount of money in the bank accounts as well. So take a copy of those three, move this over a bit, take a copy of that graph, and then attach each of these as inputs to the graphing window. I'm now going to give this a label and call this money and bank accounts. And legend for it, and this is time on the horizontal axis and dollars in terms of dollars or pounds in the vertical, and I'll add money there as well. Again, same damn bug. Click on equations, get rid of it. Bring money over here, attach this also to the input, and now hit the run key again, and you can see they're all constant at the moment. If the lend fraction becomes, say, 1% of GDP, then nothing happens to GDP, but you can see the amount of money in the accounts is changing. Of course, interest payments are going to be turning up as well, okay? So there's going to be debt in the system as well. Let's now reduce the lend frac back to 0. So all these variations you're making, they change the distribution of money. They don't change the amount of money in the economy. They don't change GDP. And for that reason, your textbook teachers and your teachers will tell you we don't need to include the banking system in macro models. So I'll save this first of all and call this LF for loanable funds. I'll go back to, where did I store that previous one? Demo model there. So I'm going to open that location and then call this LF for loanable funds. Okay. Let's just add, I'll model debt there as well. Let's take a copy of, again, same bug. Okay. Take a copy of debt, divide debt by GDP. So divide one by the other, put it through a percentage key, and call this, say, D subscript R for ratio, and then curly brackets, private. So you're talking about private debt, not government debt. Now I've got that defined, and let's graph that as well. So I'll take a copy here, and I can just wire that straight up. I don't need to make a separate variable. So again, hit the run key. Again, nothing happening, but if I have a lend frac of 1% of GDP or 2% of GDP or 3%, you can see the debt's rising more quickly. Now, if I bring this back down to 0, there's still going to be redistribution of money because the debtors are paying interest on their outstanding debt to the savers again. So you get a bit of dynamics, but not much to worry about. And if your professor tells you don't bother including the banking sector in the macro model, it makes sense because it has no impact upon GDP. Now, this is a myth. So I want to show you how I fix this up quickly, because the myth is that banks don't lend money. Okay? There's just that savers are lending to borrowers. It's not true that the savers do the lending, the banks do. So I can delete this column here by clicking on the minus key here. Debt disappears. And it's not true that the savers are doing lending, so delete that row. And it's not true that the interest being paid to the savers is paid to the bank. So I've now removed all those features to bring in the real world, again, the same bug. So what I want to do is say the debt is actually an asset of the bank. So click on the plus key to create room for an extra asset for the banks. Click on the down wedge, it'll show you debt. So now debt increases the amount of money in the account of the borrowers, but it also increases the liability I have, because interest payments now paid to the banks. So I can now tell the program to balance the equity, so interest is now paid to the banks. Now, one feature I haven't covered yet, I haven't got the banks doing anything. I've got no behaviour by the banks. So the simplest thing is to show that the banks spend exactly what they earn in interest. This is not the real world, just a simplifying assumption to make it easy. So I can just say, let's bring the interest payments here and say that banks spend all that money back into the economy. So I create an extra row and call this bank spending. And let's say the bank's spending comes out of this account. Now, again, the same bug. Get rid of it that way. So I'm going to have minus spend by banks coming out of the equity of the banks, and they spend, say, equally on savers and borrowers. So 0.5 times spend by banks goes to savers, and the same to borrowers. Again, the same bloody bug. So 0.5 spend subscript B there. So that's now just saying they're going to spend that money they earn straight away. So I now need to bring down that extra variable there. So I can go to the variable browser and click on the window. Again, this is not complete, so I've got to drag the window so you can see it. There's spending by the banks. It's say interest payments are spent. Notice I accidentally curved that line there. You can right click and choose it, just tell it to straighten the line if that sort of thing happens. Again, that same bug is back. So back to equations to free up the program. So what I've done now, I've simply changed from the loanable funds model that textbooks teach to the real world in which banks actually create money. Let's hit the run key again and see if there's any difference in behavior. No lending, no, exactly the same. Have lending, GDP rises. Okay, because lending is creating money and that's turning over more rapidly, and that enables the economy to grow over time. So you get a very different figure of the world if you say bank lending creates money. And that's one reason that textbooks and neoclassical economists resist this stuff, because it shows that if they take it seriously, they've got to include banks and debt and money in their macro models, and they've got a century and a half of believing that they can ignore the banking sector when they build macro models. So that's just how important these realizations are. Oh, I haven't balanced that equation too, by the way. You can see this number turning up over here. That's because I forgot to balance the equity there. And now I can go back and restart the whole thing again, and that will remain at zero as I increase the amount of lending I'm creating. Notice the amount of money in the bank accounts is increasing, the money supply is increasing, etc., etc. So let's now stop that and save this as a different name. I'll save this and call BOMD, which stands for Bank Originated Money and Debt, which is the real world. So that's a very high speed introduction to how you build stuff in Ravel. What you're going to be trying to do is build a model where there's just a monetary system, and then you add in a parallel currency with the universal carbon credits. And you're going to face a lot of work in getting it done, but I hope it'll be an interesting challenge.
Okay, thanks a lot, Steve. So
Thank you
those
very
models
much.
that you saved you'll be able to share them?
Yeah, I'll share them in a second. I'll share
Okay.
quite a few others as well.
Excellent.
Somebody's asking a question then. I heard a voice.
YouTube.
Oh, I just like found this really helpful. Uh, but it's the really start, and I found that it is really helpful because even though you're not a computer scientist, you're able to handle this or um, get on the track to weigh different perspectives without.
Yeah, it
Oh,
is
but
very. Yeah, sorry. Okay.
I've got a question like regarding the basic models in Ravel.
Yeah.
Do I have to start like focusing on a single sector, for example, like just a household and the carbon, like what we are dealing, a carbon registry, or it's just like more critical to start with intersector, for example, like how does the money flows between households and maybe
Yeah.
retail?
Yeah,
Mm,
you do. I'm just doing an incredibly simple model here, as you can tell. I've only got workers and
mm,
capitalists and, borrowers and debtors and so on. In your model, you would have firms that have workers, firms that have shareholders. You'd have consumption goods firms and investment good firms,
mhm,
all this sort of stuff, and then have intersectoral dynamics between the two. It does get to be quite complicated. So what I'd suggest is starting with the simplest possible model, where you divide the economy effectively into two social classes, capitalists and workers. Capitalists are wealthy and therefore consume lots of carbon. Workers are poor and then consume very little carbon. And then you'd bring in the carbon price as well. You'd build up a model so you have the monetary transactions and show that functioning, you know, effectively. And then you'd add in the carbon credit as well. And of course, carbon credits will be created, I think you'll find created by the Treasury, not by the central bank when you lay out the logic. And then carbon credits would be allocated to people on a per capita basis, because there's many more workers than there are capitalists. Then most of that would be at the social level. You'd show like 90% or 95% of the carbon credits going to the workers and only 5% to the capitalists. You then have different consumption rates. This is all the stuff you'd need to put together in a proper model. Capitalists consuming much more carbon per head than the workers do. So you'd still have a high level of consumption by workers because there are so many more workers than capitalists, but still you'd have a substantially higher carbon consumption level by the capitalist per head. And then what you'd include is each person would get an identical amount per head in terms of the carbon credit. So the capitalists would run out very quickly. The workers would have leftover stocks of it. And then you'd have that dynamic. So capitalists would run out of carbon, be unable to consume, let's say. So if they want to consume, they'd need to buy off the workers, which means a flow in the opposite direction of money from the capitalists to the workers to buy the credits, put up a price mechanism inside
mhm.
there as well, etc., etc. It's a complicated job, but if you have the time, I think you'll find it quite stimulating.
Oh, yes, I see. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. All righty. Look, Adam, I'll leave you at that. I've got to go back to working on that book of mine. So I'll copy these across to you, and I'll send a whole lot of example files in Ravel, and I'll also include a copy of Ravel that students are free to continue using. The way we distribute Ravel at the moment is complicated because we're using Patreon, and Patreon's got file size limitations. So when you download from Patreon, you get a version of the modeling component which works forever. Okay? So you can, as soon as you've got Minsky or Ravel on your computer, you can model indefinitely. We also distribute a commercial data analysis component that you have to pay money for on the Ravel side to get access to. But as long as you're not analyzing data, you don't actually need that component anyway. That component expires every 90 days. So even if you do buy it, not only buy it once and disappear, you've still got it for 90 days there. So, but the main thing you need is the modeling component. So once you've got a copy, you can continue using it. It'd be worth signing up at the $2 per month level on Revelation to be able to get the regular updates, particularly seeing the bug that I've shown here that's so damn prevalent, that damn screen refreshing bug, which is generated by the fact that we're moving Ravel's calculations from the CPU to the GPU, and therefore got to allow multi-threading. And at the moment, we're caught with that little hassle turning up where the program gets caught by Windows whacking up a interrupt, and the interrupt then stops the program working until you do that refresh trick I showed you a moment ago. So hopefully in the next version that will no longer be there, and you'll be able to get around that little nuisance and use the program indefinitely to build these models.
Are there any problems with the version that you sent out already to us that the students have got? I don't think you see any of the bugs that Professor Steve was looking at today, right?
Yes, I'm starting looking at the one that you sent us.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a bug of the latest version, so you wouldn't actually see it. But it's worth the fact that you can actually design on Canvas. That's been a major limitation if you had to bring up that pop-up window all the time. I find it easy to work on design on the canvas itself. That's why I've asked for this particular feature, but it's only half finished. So stick with the versions you've got. They'll load any program I send you, but I'll send you a latest version as well, so you can install that and get the access to be able to design stuff directly on a canvas rather than needing the pop-up window.
Okay. I know how difficult it is trying to demonstrate with a buggy program, having worked in the industry myself. It's excruciating sometimes, but thank you very much.
You're welcome, mate. Okay, I'll leave it to all. So good luck and look forward to seeing the results.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye. I'll send the links to you, Adam, via email.
Okay, great stuff.
Okay. Bye.
You two, have you got any questions for me before you go?
Oh, I think not for now.
Okay, great. Are you able to get onto Signal, the instant messenger?
Yes, I was trying to download the app. I think in order to join the group chat on MacBook, I have to first download this app on phone and connect this to the devices.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Okay, so well, thanks a
I
lot for
would do
coming along.
this like shortly.
That's great. Okay, well, yeah, you can email me as well anyway. And
Okay, sure.
so good luck with that, and I'll send out an email with the once I've uploaded these recordings. I think what I'll do is I'll split this recording stuff up into 2 or 3 sections because he showed
Okay.
2 different models there, and upload it onto YouTube for you all, and I'll send out an
Sure.
email.
That would
Okay,
be
thanks
great.
a lot.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Speak again soon. Bye.
Okay, bye.